Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, this is actually a video I meant to make actually like 2 or 3 years ago, but I'm finally getting around to it. I just haven't never taken the time to record it. Basically, as you can tell by the title of this video, this is a video where I'm basically comparing and contrasting the differences between the different Being Human TV shows. Obviously, there's the North American adaptation, and obviously there's the original British series. So basically, I'm going to tell you some of the differences that I'm aware of that I just think is kind of interesting across both series, just comparing the two. Because obviously they're similar in certain regards, but at the same time they are very different series. Obviously, I will be getting into spoilers about both series, so if you have not seen both series in their entireties, do not watch this video because, like I said, I will be getting into spoilers. If you've seen all of one and you feel like, well, I've seen one, I don't want to watch the other, you can still watch this video and I will spoil stuff from the other one you haven't seen, but I would highly recommend watching both. I'll kind of dive into that in a little bit, but like, there's enough differences. Let me go ahead and say from the beginning that it is well worth like checking out both series. Like I said, I'll dive into that in a little bit. So spoiler warnings kind of already thrown out there. So if you're sticking around, that means you're fine with being spoiled or you've seen both series. So let's get to it. Really quickly, the first thing I want to bring up is what I was just talking about, elaborating on what I mean. The fact of the matter is these series are similar in like obviously what the story is about, a werewolf, a vampire, and a ghost being roommates, obviously. And obviously, especially the first seasons are very similar. Obviously they take place in different places, but a lot of like their story elements end up going to very different degrees. I'll break down the characters even more, but you take like the British series actually has a complete cast change by like the 5th season. Like all the original actors have left the show. Their characters have stories ended their respective ways. But like obviously, like I said, I'll be kind of diving into that a little bit more. Like let's break down some of the things at first. Well, since I brought up the characters, let's talk about specifically the characters' names. Like for example, you take, well, not just the characters' names, but the characters themselves, but this kind of applies, is you take Aiden. Aiden's the vampire in the North American Being Human, whereas in the British Being Human, it's Mitchell. Some very interesting things about that. Obviously, that's a big difference in itself, but the thing is that Aiden's name is actually an homage to the actor who played Mitchell in the British series. The actor who played Mitchell, his name is Aiden Turner, hence why Aiden's name is Aiden. So that's kind of, I always thought that's kind of like a fascinating bit of information, but kind of also showing you the difference between Mitchell and Aiden is their age difference. Whereas Mitchell's only like 100 and something, Aiden is actually 200 plus. Like, cause Mitchell became a vampire around World War I, whereas Aiden, I think it was kind of roughly around colonial ages, kind of like, I think the American Revolution, I want to say specifically, but I could be wrong. Next is you have the werewolf character. In the North American adaptation, it's Josh. In the British version, it's George. And even George and Josh are very different in certain regards, especially like around how they became werewolves. George never had the storyline that Josh did about like having a best friend who ended up being involved in it. Because in Josh's case, like he ended up killing his best friend when he ended up like, I think around that same time, Josh didn't kill his best friend. The werewolf ended up killing his best friend, I think. And he, like later on, his best friend pops up in the show as a ghost. But that storyline never happened for George, because also Josh kind of, we deal with his family life, because there's later parts in the series that his sister kind of becomes a recurring character in the show. But that was something that was never explored with George, as well as the fact is George never went about the same extent that Josh did. Josh tried to find like an actual cure from it from a scientific perspective, but George never really did that. George was kind of like, I'm stuck this way. It's been a little while since I've seen both series, so obviously my memory is going to be a little fuzzy on certain things, but I don't remember George in particular ever really doing it. He wanted to change things, but I don't think he ever was as active as Josh was about the whole situation, but I could be wrong. And finally, you have the ghost characters. You have Annie in the original British series, and then you have Sally in the North American adaptation, and very similar stories. I can't remember, I'm sure it was the same, but I don't remember as clearly if Annie's situation was exactly like Sally's, at her like, was it her fiance? Yeah, her fiance ended up killing her. I want to say that was it, but I think their stories ended up differently, because I don't remember if Annie's fiance came back as a ghost. I know Sally's definitely did. And then there's also the aspect of Josh/George's significant other that ends up becoming a werewolf themselves. Like for example, Josh's significant other is Nora, whereas George's was Nina, and different things happen with both situations. Like obviously, well, I mean, obviously I'm going into spoilers, but like George and Nina died. Obviously, Josh and Nora were fine. Actually, it's like interesting too because their stories kind of split differently as well, because it's like Josh and Nora kind of had a split for a while, just because like Nora kind of more embraced the werewolf side of things because she was with those purebloods, and then that never happened to Nina and George, to my recollection. So that was kind of an interesting thing. Like, so Nina wasn't in the story for a while, but eventually she came back. Her and Josh kind of like made things work. Eventually ended up having a family. George and Nina ended up having a baby, but obviously that whole situation didn't end very nicely. To me, what's an interesting thing, kind of like, I think I've brought this up before, but maybe not. If I haven't, I'm gonna mention it here, is that if you really break these stories down, because they take place in different parts of the world and they also include different characters, they could actually coexist in the same time. Yes, they have similar stories, but at the same time, they're so different that it's not like it's a complete retelling, you know? So that's what's so interesting to me. So, you know, that, I don't know if the creator, I think the creator's name is Toby Whitehouse. I don't know if he intentionally, when the North American adaptation was being made, he decided to kind of make it like that. By it being somewhere else and it being different characters, you're able to make it kind of coexist in the same universe. So that's always a fascinating thing about this adaptation to me. I don't know if that really applies for every adaptation, but at least in this particular regard, I feel like it could work out. Like I said, I don't know if that was the original idea for it or not, but it could work. Another thing that pops up in the North American adaptation that did pop up in the British series is the fact is that there are witches, for one. Witches kind of play a more story relevance in season 3. Well, really, you only know them because there's only one witch that ever pops up in the entire series. Well, actually, I take that back, because there were witches involved in the British series, but they were told in past events. Like, you know, like Hal's story, that's where witches came into play, but witches, to my recollection, never actually came present day. So it's kind of like an old school thing. I guess it's a situation where like maybe the Salem witch trials things kind of happened at that time and they were all wiped out, or maybe they just died naturally. I don't really remember them ever diving too deeply into like witches beyond that. Maybe they weren't even witches, but I like there was definitely like a magic element to everything kind of in Hal's past about like the evil that was still the way that ultimately they had to deal with in the final season, or rather series. So, but like I said, a lot of my memory's foggy on certain aspects, so I do apologize. But subsequently, after the North American adaptation, like witches never popped up. It's just that one witch, so I guess she might have been one of like the last ones still alive. Also in the storyline were zombies. Zombies played like a one-off storyline in the British series, and that's kind of something, I guess they took that concept because it was like literally one episode where a ghost lady came back as her human body, but she was a zombie, and then eventually she ended up dying, and then she ended up, you know, passing on. It was a one-off thing that was never touched for the rest of this series, but it became a storyline element in the North American adaptation in season 3. Which I guess, like I said, I think they took that element and they're like, well, why not make a full storyline out of it? But the whole thing with the whole zombie thing, in the British show, she actually came back like, oh, like a typical zombie. Whereas in season 3, they didn't really know they were coming back as zombies. They had fresh bodies, but it wasn't until later on that zombie signs started showing. They started eating and killing people. So Sally, as well as the two people she like who were her ghost friends that came back as well. And obviously, I brought it up earlier, but a big difference is that in the British series, there was a replacing of the entire cast. Mitchell obviously died at the end of season 3. George died at the beginning of season 4. Nina died off screen, and then Annie dies at the end of season 4. So obviously that led way to Hal, Tom, and Alex. You know, all three of them being the main characters in the final series. That never happened in the original Being Human series, because obviously certain storylines, like with your ghost character and your vampire character both dying. Also, the fact is them being in a relationship, that's a similar thing. Like Annie and Mitchell had feelings for each other. That super got complicated. And obviously Sally and Aiden had feelings for each other. That eventually got super complicated. Turned into a whole thing. Really quickly now, I'm bringing it up just because it kind of connects to that. The whole time traveling element, there was never anything like that in the British series, which is kind of interesting to me. That was a whole plot in like season 4, was that Sally went back in time and she changed everything. She tried to make everything better. Didn't necessarily work out, but that was just kind of an interesting aspect. So pretty much but getting back to it, pretty much all the original British characters, their characters died. but that didn't apply to the original being human because, I mean the North American being human, excuse me, because Josh and Nora still lived. Obviously, like, Aiden and Sally ended up passing on together at the end of it all, so it's kind of like similar happy endings, because it's like, well, ultimately, you never get to see it too much, but basically you get hinted at, oh, basically when Annie passed on, she met up with George, Nina, she had the baby, Sally had the baby, not Sally, Annie had the baby. Annie had, you know, Nina and George's baby, and just there with Mitchell, kind of like them being reunited in the afterlife in a sense. Whereas it's kind of like, hey, George and Sally kind of have a happily ever after. I meant Nora and Josh. Another big difference between the UK and the North American adaptation is the fact is, in the British show, they actually go up against the devil. He's the final antagonist. The whole witch thing I brought up earlier, like about that great evil, ended up basically being the devil. I think I remember the whole thing being he basically made people kill themselves. That's what his storyline was. And that was interesting to me because, like, the North American adaptation never led to them fighting such like a big baddie, because the final antagonist of the show was a ghost, another ghost girl that was in the house that ended up being like the final antagonist. It's kind of interesting too in certain regards, because basically that whole situation ended with Tom, Alex, and Hal all becoming human again, which is kind of neat. Whereas in the North American adaptation, Aiden ended up becoming human because of this whole storyline in the end. Sally stayed a ghost, but like when Aiden died, he died as a human, and obviously George and Nora stayed werewolves. I am trying to remember whether Mitchell had a son or not, like, because Aiden had at least two. I forgot, I think one was Henry, but I forgot the second one. The kid he was helping take care of at the hospital, he ended up making him a vampire like him just so the kid could live, but there were complications with the whole situation. So I don't remember if there was a situation like that with Mitchell. I'm pretty sure it never got to that extent. There's also an interesting aspect that season 3 of the North American adaptation did, and that's basically it wiped out most vampires. Not all of them, but like the vampire population took a big hit, because between season 2 and 3, where it's like Aiden was during this whole situation being buried, basically a virus spread around that made it so that vampires couldn't feed off of humans. Werewolves ended up being the cure, because the moment they drank werewolves' blood, it made them a little sick, but eventually it gave them immunity to the virus. So, because basically you drink blood from a person, you become infected and you die. Like, so that's how most of the vampire population ended up dying between both season 2 and 3. You saw it a little bit. If I remember correctly, it happened to Henry, like, off screen. Aiden's, you know, first son. Not his son's son, but also I don't think that ever happened either. Now that I'm thinking up sons, because he ends up coming across his wife later in the series. Did he kill her? I don't remember. Aiden. Because I remember, like, she tried to wane off, because Aiden always had that dark side to him when it came to the vampire thing. Something obviously him and Mitchell share. They always try to fight it, you know, trying to fight that darkness inside of them. And his wife was trying to help him do that too, but he couldn't control himself. It just, he got those urges. Because it was just one of those things where it's like when he became a vampire, that was just, it hit him. He always tried his hardest to fight his indulgences, but it didn't always work out for him. So, because if I remember correctly, I forgot if it was either Aiden or it was his wife that ended up killing their son. I think it might have been Aiden who did it, and his wife forgave him, but like I'm pretty sure he ended up killing her. I forgot what the exact circumstances were around that, why he did that. But I mean, obviously those are just some of, these are just some of the differences that I'm aware of. Obviously, I'm sure there are a lot more, so let me know your thoughts. Obviously, let me know some of the things that you might have done, you know, heavy research on. You're like, oh my God, Michael, you totally missed this. This is kind of a cool, interesting thing, difference between them. Obviously, let me know, like, what are some of your favorite differences? And obviously, like, you know, ultimately tell me what your favorite series is. Do you prefer the North American adaptation? Do you prefer the British series? To me, I will say what I've said in the past. I like both of them equally. Like, it's just because I personally saw the North American adaptation first. I waited for it to fully finish its course, then I immediately started the British series afterwards. And like, I love both of them because they are very different series, have very different approaches. It's like, you know, it's like the North American adaptation took that original material and it put its own spin to it to a big degree, in my opinion. So, but really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good